I buried my boy 20 years ago. I watched them seal his casket. I stood there as the last shovel of dirt landed on the lid, the sound of it sinking so deep into me that I still hear it at night. And for 2 decades, every single Sunday, I drove to Maple Ridge Cemetery, because it was the only place where I still felt like his father. But last month, at 2:43 in the morning, my phone lit up with his name. My son, who'd been gone for 20 years, was calling me. And when I picked up, the first thing he said was, "Dad, where am I?" My breath collapsed. All those years of silence cracked like ice under my feet. Before I tell you what happened next, check that you're subscribed, because this story, my story, deserves to reach whoever still believes justice has a voice. I should tell you what my life looked like before that night. Maybe then you'll understand why that call felt like my world split apart. I was 58, retired from a small watch repair shop on the edge of Colton Springs, Ohio. A quiet town. A quiet life. Too quiet. My hands had fixed thousands of watches, but I couldn't fix time itself, couldn't turn it back, couldn't bring him home. After Evan died, my marriage buckled under the pressure of grief. My ex-wife, Elena, remarried, built a new family. I never blamed her. We all survived differently. But I stayed behind in the house where Evan learned to walk, where he painted a rocket ship on his bedroom wall, where he practiced guitar until midnight. I kept his room the same, his posters, his old jacket still hanging on the doorknob, the smell of pine from the aftershave he used once. People told me it wasn't healthy, that I should move on. They never understood that grief isn't something you heal from. You build your life around the hole and hope it doesn't swallow you. The number, his number, stayed in my phone. I paid the bill for a disconnected line for 20 years, $35 every month. My way of pretending the distance wasn't final. So, when the call came, when his name lit up the screen, I didn't believe it at first. I thought maybe the phone glitched. Maybe I was dreaming. But the ring kept coming. 4 times. 5. 6. Until something inside me broke, and I answered. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, breathing. Soft. Human. Familiar. And when he said, "Dad," my knees went weak. I gripped the nightstand so hard my knuckles whitened. He sounded confused. Lost. Like someone waking from a nightmare they couldn't remember. "I don't know where I am," he whispered. "Everything feels wrong." I asked where he was calling from. "I don't know. People walk right through me. Like I'm not there." That sentence, that impossible, terrifying sentence, hit me so hard I almost dropped the phone. I whispered, "Evan?" He didn't answer right away. Then, "Yeah, it's me." But before I could ask anything else, the line cut. Just gone. I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed until the sun came up, staring at the call log like it was a crack in reality. The timestamp burned into my mind. 2:43 a.m. 7 minutes, 14 seconds. 3 days passed. Longest 3 days of my life. I carried my phone from room to room, afraid to take a shower in case he called back. I didn't go outside, didn't shave, could barely eat. Grief had always been a weight. But now it was a storm, unpredictable, electric, alive. On the 4th night, at 3:13 in the morning, the phone rang again. Same name, same photo, same cold rush through my spine. I answered before the first ring finished. His voice was weaker this time. "Dad, I found something. An address." I grabbed a pen, my hand shaking so badly I could barely hold it. "Tell me," I said. "Hollow Creek Apartments, Unit 9, Ridgeview, Pennsylvania." The name hit me like a punch. Hollow Creek. I'd heard it before years ago, in a local news segment, about a guardianship fraud incident. A facility where vulnerable people had been exploited, their finances drained by someone meant to protect them. Why would my son be connected to that place? Why that building? Why now? My heart hammered against my ribs. I forced myself to speak. "Evan, stay where you are. I'll come get you. 8 hours. I just need 8 hours." He breathed shakily, like he was cold. "I'll try. But Dad, I'm scared." "I'm coming," I told him. "I'm coming right now." Then the line fell silent again. Second call. Second. Disappearance. That was when the dread settled in. The kind that sits behind your ribs and whispers that something isn't just wrong. Something has been wrong for a very long time. I couldn't ignore the memory that crept back about Hollow Creek, the financial abuse cases, the forged documents used to take control of people without family. Could someone have taken advantage of Evan? Could someone have controlled his life, assuming no one would come looking for him? If he didn't know who he was, he would have signed anything. That thought nearly split me open. As I packed a duffel bag, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A small envelope wedged under the front door. No return address. Only 2 words scrawled across the front in handwriting I didn't recognize. He's alive. Inside was a single printed photo. A photo of a young man standing outside Hollow Creek Apartments. Older than Evan had ever lived to be. But with my son's eyes. My son's posture. My son's scar above the right eyebrow. I sat down slowly, the breath leaving my lungs in a long, trembling wave. This wasn't random. This wasn't chance. Someone knew. Someone had been watching. And someone wanted me to find him. Or wanted me to walk into something I didn't yet understand. That's when the fear sharpened into something colder. Something steadier. A quiet reckoning rising from the ashes of 2 lost decades. I picked up my keys. Locked my front door. Looked once at Evan's untouched room. The posters, the guitar, the dust, dancing in the early morning light, and whispered, "Hold on, son. I'm coming." Then, I drove into the dark, toward a building I hadn't seen, a truth I wasn't ready for, and a betrayal deeper than any family deserves. Tell me, would you forgive them, or would you choose justice? Subscribe for the next true Canadian family story on Fractured Vengeance. And tell me, from which city are you listening tonight? The highway felt endless that night, the kind of dark that swallows the road until the headlights look like they're cutting through smoke. I drove for hours with my hands clenched on the wheel, the photo from the envelope sitting on the passenger seat like a live wire. Every few miles, I'd glance at it again, at the older face that shouldn't exist, at the eyes that looked like mine, and like the boy I lost. Fog rolled across the asphalt as I crossed into Pennsylvania. The further I drove, the more the air felt charged, as if something was waiting for me at the end of the road. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was hope. After 20 years of living with a ghost, both feelings tasted the same. Ridgeview was colder than Colton Springs. Quiet town, old brick shops, paper mill smell in the air. At 4:30 in the morning, everything was still except a diner with one flickering open sign. I didn't stop. I followed the address scribbled on the back of my hand until the houses thinned, then vanished, replaced by cracked pavement and chain-link fences. Hollow Creek Apartments stood like a skeleton in the half-light. Boarded windows, yellow tape, a faded condemnation notice half torn from the door. It looked abandoned, except for one detail. Unit 9, far end of the 3rd floor, had a faint glow leaking through the curtains. A soft, warm, impossible glow. My breath fogged the cold morning air. I stepped through a gap in the fence, the metal brushing my coat like fingers. Every instinct told me to turn around. But the envelope at my side reminded me I didn't have the luxury of fear anymore. Inside, the building smelled of rot and wet drywall. Wallpaper peeled away like skin. My footsteps echoed through the long corridor. A gust of cold wind swept past me, strong enough to rattle the EXIT sign, and for a second I could have sworn I heard someone whisper my name behind me. I didn't turn around. I kept walking, the dim light ahead pulling me forward. Apartment 9's door didn't match the others. The others were cracked, swollen, hanging, lopsided. This one was solid, straight, clean, like someone had replaced it yesterday. I pressed my hand against it. Warm. Not room temperature warm. As if someone had been standing behind it moments ago. My stomach tightened. I pushed the door open, and the world tilted. The room was normal, perfect, even. A fresh coffee smell drifted in the air. The carpet looked vacuumed. The kitchen counter held a mug with a ring of brown at the bottom, like someone had just taken their last sip. The TV remote lay neatly beside a couch that wasn't coated in dust, but in the kind of everyday wear that comes from years of living. It was wrong. So wrong it made my skin prickle. I moved deeper inside. Framed photos lined the hallway. Wall photos of a boy, a teenager, then a man. A life in chronological order. A life I didn't witness. A life that shouldn't have happened at all. Each face, each version of him, looked like Evan aged through the years he never lived. I stopped at one picture. Evan older, maybe in his 30s, standing at a lake dock. Sunlight on his face. His smile was small, soft, real. I felt the back of my throat tighten. 20 years of birthdays. 20 years of Christmas mornings. 20 years of moments I would never get back. I touched the frame and felt something inside me crumble. My eyes landed on a second picture. This one chilled me, differently. It wasn't of Evan. It was of me. A photo from 15 years ago. A grocery store parking lot. I was loading bags into my truck. I didn't see a camera. Didn't know someone was watching me. But now, here it was. Framed. Placed deliberately on his wall. Someone had watched both of us. Someone had followed both our lives. Someone who didn't want us to find each other. Until now. I moved into the kitchen. Paperwork spilled across the small table, held down by an empty glass. I lifted the top sheet. Utility bills addressed to Evan Cole. Bank statements showing deposits from an anonymous trust. Medical receipts from a clinic specializing in cognitive trauma. Phone bills, tracing back years, regular payments, consistent patterns. Someone had built a legal life for him. Someone with resources. Someone expecting no one to question it. My pulse accelerated. I grabbed a second stack handwritten notes in shaky cursive, like someone writing through a panic. The dates were recent. I read the top page, the words uneven. I wake up and I don't know who I am. I found this room and it feels familiar. But it also feels like a lie. I see faces in my dreams. One of them is yours. I think you're my father. I think something went wrong 20 years ago. The next line hit like a punch. Please find me before he does. Before he does. Before who? What had my son been hiding from? What had he remembered? And what had he been forced to forget? I turned the page. There was an address scribbled in the corner, a name. Harold Grayson. I recognized it immediately. Ridgeview News had mentioned him years back. An independent caseworker, accused of taking financial control of vulnerable adults. A guardianship predator. Someone who exploited people with no family. Or people who believed they had no family. My chest burned. If Evan had amnesia after the accident, if he woke up without identity, someone like Grayson would have seen him as opportunity. A blank page. A life he could rewrite for profit. I froze when I heard a soft thump from the back room. A door. Clicking shut. I wasn't alone. My hand gripped the nearest object, a heavy lamp. I stepped down the hallway slowly, the boards creaking under my weight. The bedroom door was cracked open. A warm draft brushed past my face, carrying the faintest hint of aftershave. The same kind my son used when he was 17. I pushed the door. The room was empty, except for something on the nightstand. A wallet. A worn leather wallet. I picked it up with unsteady fingers, flipping it open. Driver's license. Name. Evan Cole. Birth date. The same as my son's. The photo. Him, in his late 30s, eyes tired, but undeniably his. A small scar above the right eyebrow, the same scar he got falling off his bike when he was 7. My hands shook so badly the wallet slipped to the floor. Someone thumped the wall outside. Another sound. A creak. Footsteps in the hallway. But when I opened the door, no one was there. Only silence. The kind that feels watched. I backed into the living room, heart pounding. And that's when I saw it. A small envelope slid under the apartment door. No sound. No shadow. Just there. Inside, a single message typed on a thin sheet of paper. He's still alive. And you're running out of time. I stood there in the soft light of a living room that shouldn't exist, surrounded by 20 years of a life my son never lived, and understood that whatever happened 20 years ago wasn't over. Tell me, would you forgive them? Or would you choose justice? Subscribe for the next true Canadian family story on Fractured Vengeance. And tell me, from which city are you listening tonight? I left apartment 9 just as the first gray line of dawn pushed over the rooftops, the kind of pale morning light that makes everything look both harmless and haunted. My fingers were still trembling around the steering wheel when I pulled out of the lot. I kept seeing the photos on that wall, my son aging into a man he was never alive to become. A life carefully stitched together like a quilt, meant to fool the world. But there was one thing I couldn't shake. The name on those notes. Harold Grayson. I drove straight to County General Hospital in Ridgeview. If anyone knew what happened 20 years ago, it would be the people who worked in the ER that night. The automatic doors slid open, and the sterile smell of antiseptic hit me like a wave of déjà vu. I hadn't set foot in a hospital since Evan's funeral. My legs felt stiff, my chest tight with memories I'd spent years burying. I asked the front desk if Dr. Meredith Shaw still worked there. The nurse looked surprised but nodded and pointed me toward the neurology wing. When Dr. Shaw stepped out of her office, I recognized her immediately, not because I'd met her before, but because she carried the same exhaustion I'd seen on every doctor who'd had to tell a parent their child was gone. Lines around her mouth, hair pulled back neatly, eyes that carried too many stories. "I'm Dr. Shaw," she said gently. "You asked about a patient from 20 years ago." I swallowed. A John Doe brought in after a crash. November 2004. Her face changed just slightly, but enough for me to know she remembered. "Yes," she said quietly. "I remember that night." She led me into her office, closed the door, and locked it. That simple click made every hair on my arm stand up. "Why are you looking into this case now?" she asked. I didn't want to tell her everything at once, but something in her expression pushed me forward. "My son," I said. "I lost him in a crash the same night. I identified his body. But now," my voice faltered, "now I've found evidence that he may still be alive." She lowered herself into her chair slowly, like the air had thickened. "Show me what you have." I handed her the photo from the envelope, the one of Evan standing outside Hollow Creek. Shaw stared at it for a long time, then set it down carefully, as if she were handling an artifact. "I need to show you something," she said, opening an old metal filing cabinet. After a moment she pulled out a thick, dust-coated folder, the kind of file you only keep because something about it never sat right. She laid it on her desk between us. "This is the John Doe," she said. "The one from November 4th, 2004. She flipped open the folder. My throat tightened when I saw the first photo. A young man on a stretcher, face bruised, unconscious. But the bone structure, the jawline. It was Evan. Older? No. Younger? No. Just him. Him. As he was at 19. I reached out, touching the edge of the paper. "My God," I whispered. Dr. Shaw nodded, her voice low. I knew the two cases that night were complicated. Two accidents from the same intersection, reported minutes apart. One confirmed dead on arrival. One alive, but severely impaired. No identification. "That doesn't make sense," I said. "It didn't," she replied. "Not then, not now." She laid out more files. Lab results. Intake notes. Signatures. Timestamps. That's when I noticed something. Two signatures from the attending physician that didn't match. One rushed. Messy. One controlled. Looping. "Who signed these?" I asked. Dr. Shaw hesitated. "The attending physician that night was Dr. Alan Pierce." She tapped the neater signature. "This is Pierce." Her finger slid to the sloppier one. "But this isn't." A forged signature. Right there in black ink. On a document declaring a young man dead. A chill washed up my spine. "You're telling me someone falsified records the night my son supposedly died?" She lowered her eyes. "I'm telling you that someone altered medical documents. And I'm telling you something else." She pushed another photo toward me, grainy CCTV footage from the hospital hallway. Two gurneys. Two bodies. Two young men brought in 6 minutes apart. The timestamp glitching between frames, jumping backward twice. My God. I leaned closer. The second body, the one tagged as John Doe, had the same build as Evan. The same hair. The same scar on his chin. "Why didn't anyone compare them?" I asked, my voice rising. "We tried," she whispered. But someone from administration pulled the report before we could complete identification. They said the families had already confirmed both identities. But I only identified one. Yes. And the other had no family. Or so we were told. The room spun. I gripped the desk to steady myself. Dr. Shaw. Who would want to mislabel a patient? Why? She picked up the file and sighed. Follow the money. Those words hit hard. She pulled out a final document, a guardianship appointment dated 3 weeks after the accident. The appointed guardian, Harold Grayson. My heart dropped. He took control of John Doe's medical decisions, housing, and financial affairs, she said. And he continued as guardian for over a decade. He shouldn't have had that authority unless the patient had no known family. But Evan had me. He had a home. He had a life. Yes, she said quietly. But the system didn't look for you. And someone ensured they wouldn't. I felt the anger rising, not wild, not explosive, just cold, focused. The kind of anger that builds a path toward justice. Where is Grayson now? Still in Ridgeview, she said. Still handling adult guardianships. But there have been complaints. Missing funds, manipulated wills, financial abuse. I've tried to report him, but I never had proof. Until now. She placed a slip of paper into my hand, a fresh address. Grayson's address. Then her voice dropped to a whisper. Be careful. If Grayson realizes you're onto him, he won't go quietly. I left the hospital with that folder pressed to my chest. The truth, suddenly clearer than the sunrise breaking through the windows. My son didn't just disappear into a coma. Someone took control of him. Someone profited from him. Someone stole his identity, his future, his entire adulthood. And now that someone knew I was back, tell me, would you forgive them? Or would you choose justice? Subscribe for the next true Canadian family story on fractured vengeance. And tell me, from which city are you listening tonight? I drove to North Point Manufacturing long after sunset. The kind of industrial plant that glows like an orange ember in the dark. Trucks hissed past. Workers in reflective jackets drifted between shifts, and the cold wind carried the metallic scent of the factory's night operations. My hands wouldn't stop trembling, not from fear, but from the pull of something I couldn't name. Hope. Dread. Both can feel the same when you've been waiting 20 years. I stayed in the truck until the workers started filing out for their midnight break. They walked in groups, laughing, rubbing their hands together for warmth. And then, one man walked out alone. Tall, broad shoulders, a familiar tilt in his stride, the slight slump I used to tease him about. My breath hitched. It was like watching a memory step out of the past, wearing a stranger's jacket. He leaned against the chain-link fence, looking up at the sky as if searching for something he'd lost. A glow from the overhead floodlight cut across his face, and the world around me blurred. The line of his jaw, the scar above his eyebrow, the way he ran his hand through his hair like he used to when nervous. It was him. Older, weathered, alive. My legs carried me before I even realized I was walking. Gravel crunched under my boots. He turned at the sound, his eyes landing on mine. Confusion flickered across his face. Then something else. Something that looked like recognition, even if he didn't understand why. Can I help you? He asked, his voice deep, steady, older but still his. The kind of voice that made my ribs shake. I couldn't speak at first. My throat closed. My vision blurred. I forced the words out. You look like someone I used to know. He took a step closer. The light caught his face again. Clear this time. Unmistakable. He frowned, studying me with an intensity that made the air between us feel charged. That's strange, he murmured. I feel like I know you too. Like I've seen you before. His brow furrowed. Have we met? Before I could decide how to answer, he added softly. You were in my dream. My heart stopped. What dream? He swallowed, glancing away as if embarrassed. For weeks now, I've been dreaming of a man standing in a cemetery. A man who looks like you. He's always standing near a grave, just watching me. I don't know why. He rubbed his forehead. I don't know what any of it means. My voice cracked. What's your name? He hesitated. Evan Cole. A lie, given to him by someone else, but spoken as truth. I took a breath that felt like breaking. I'm Richard. I didn't give the last name. Not yet. Not until I had proof. Not until I knew he was safe. We stood there, in a silence heavy enough to bend the night around us. He kept staring at me, an unsettled tension pulling at his features. You look shaken, he said. Is everything okay? No, I told him honestly. None of this is okay. His eyes softened kindness, concern, something instinctive beneath the blankness of missing years. The boy I raised was still in there, somewhere behind a wall of stolen time. I need to ask you something, I said quietly. And I'm asking you to trust me, even if you don't know why. He nodded slowly. What is it? I pulled the DNA kit from my coat pocket. His eyes widened, walls rising instantly. What the hell is that for? I need to know the truth, I said. My voice trembled but held steady. Just a cheek swab. 10 seconds. No pain. If I'm wrong, I'll walk away and never bother you again. And if you're right? He asked. I met his gaze. Then someone stole 20 years from both of us. He froze. Completely. The night seemed to still with him. 20 years, he whispered. I was in an accident. They told me I had no family, no past. They said my memory loss was severe. He pressed a hand to his chest as if steadying something breaking inside. But lately, I keep remembering pieces. Things that don't belong to my life. What kind of things? He closed his eyes. A birthday cake with blue candles. A red bicycle with a broken chain. A man's laugh. Someone calling me, kiddo. A guitar leaning against a bed frame. He opened his eyes. I don't know these memories. They don't belong to me. They do, I whispered. His breath hitched. How can you be so sure? Because they belong to my son. The world seemed to tilt. He stared at me as though gravity had shifted. His fingers trembled. I don't remember being anyone else, he said. How can I be your son if I don't remember my own life? You don't have to remember for the truth to exist, I said. Let the DNA tell us. He looked down at the kit, then back at me. Fear and hope battling in his eyes. Finally, he whispered, okay. He opened his mouth. My hand shook as I swabbed the inside of his cheek. When it was done, I sealed the sample carefully and slipped it into my pocket. What happens now? He asked, voice unsteady. We wait. He nodded but didn't move. He seemed frozen in place, as if stepping away might undo whatever fragile thread connected us. Then he said, almost to himself, there's something else. You should know. I held my breath. There was a man, he said. A man who visited me for years, told me he was my guardian, signed papers for me, controlled every job I took, every apartment I lived in. He said I wasn't ready to manage anything myself. My spine stiffened. What was his name? He hesitated, his eyes filling with something like dread. Harold Grayson, he finally said. The wind cut at my face like ice. I felt something dark and sharp settle inside me, the kind of quiet vengeance that grows from truth too long buried. Before I could answer, Evan's phone buzzed. He looked down at the screen, and his face drained of color. It's him, he whispered. Grayson. He never calls this late. He let it ring, eyes wide, fingers tightening around the device until his knuckles whitened. A voicemail appeared, then a text. I stepped closer. What did he say? Evan showed me the screen. 6 words. Cold. Calculated. Terrifying. We need to talk. He found you. My heart slammed against my ribs. Evan looked at me, breath trembling. Richard, he's coming here. Tell me, would you forgive them? Or would you choose justice? Subscribe for the next true Canadian family story on fractured vengeance. And tell me, from which city are you listening tonight? Evan's phone buzzed again. He flinched like the vibration itself hurt him. I could see it in his eyes, the old fear. The conditioned obedience. The years of being told he couldn't trust himself. Grayson had trained him to shrink, to hesitate, to believe he needed someone else to make decisions for him. It made my chest tighten with a quiet rage I'd never known before. We need to get out of here, I whispered. He nodded, gripping the phone so tightly, the plastic creaked. We moved fast across the lot, the cold cutting through our jackets. The factory lights hummed above us. the metal siding reflecting a dull glow that made everything feel unreal. Once we got into my truck, I locked the doors and told him to breathe. He didn't. He just stared straight ahead. The kind of stare born from years of control. Years of being told you don't get to choose your own future. "Evan," I said softly. "You're safe now." He swallowed hard. "I don't feel safe." "You will," I promised. "And I'm not letting him take anything more from you." I drove us back to my motel. An old, quiet place where the walls hummed with ancient heaters and the air smelled faintly of pine cleaner. Once inside, I set the DNA kit on the table, ready to be shipped off first thing in the morning. Evan paced the room, fingers tapping his thigh, eyes darting to the window each time a car passed. "He always shows up before I'm ready," he murmured. "He knows everything. Where I work, where I live, every mistake, every weakness. He's not your guardian," I told him. "He's your captor." Evan stopped pacing. The word hung between us like something toxic finally being named. Capped, or, he whispered it, as though tasting a truth he'd never been allowed to swallow. Before I could say more, there was a knock at the door, soft, deliberate, the kind of knock that doesn't ask permission so much as announce inevitability. My stomach dropped. Evan froze. A second knock. A voice. Calm. Male. Smooth as polished stone. "Evan, open the door. You're confused. Let's talk." It was him. It was Grayson. Evan stumbled back, shaking his head. "No. No, he can't be here. He shouldn't know where." "He's bluffing," I said, forcing breath into my lungs. "He's trying to scare you." But the third knock, firmer, closer, told me otherwise. I grabbed my phone and dialed Dr. Shaw. She answered quickly, voice tight. "Where are you?" "Motel. On Ridgeway Road. Grayson's here." She swore under her breath. "Keep him talking. I've alerted Ridgeview PD and the hospital board. They're already reopening the guardianship fraud investigation. Don't let him leave." I hung up just as Grayson spoke again through the door. "Evan, I've taken care of you for years. You owe me the courtesy of a conversation." Evan flinched at the word "owe." He took a shaky breath, moved behind me, and whispered, "He always says that. Every time he takes something from me." I stepped closer to the door. "What did you take, Grayson?" There was a pause. A calculated inhale. "Everything he has," he replied. "Everything he'll ever have." Before I could respond, bright red lights flashed across the thin motel curtains. Then blue. Sirens low but growing. Evan's shoulders sagged with something like relief, but also fear. Fear of what would come next. Fear that justice was always just out of reach. "Evan," Grayson shouted now, voice cracking, "do not speak to them. You don't know what you're doing." But it was too late. Police voices echoed down the hall. A loud knock. A command. And then, a crash. A thud. Heavy footsteps. Handcuffs clinking. I cracked the door open just enough to see two officers pinning Grayson to the floor. He fought like a cornered animal, shouting about rights and guardianship authority. But the officers ignored him, their expressions grim with the weight of what they'd discovered in his file. Behind them came Dr. Shaw, holding a folder so thick it could have held 20 years of buried truth. When she saw Evan, her face softened. "You didn't deserve any of this," she said. "And you don't have to be afraid of him anymore." Evan stepped forward slowly, like each movement was a test of his own freedom. He looked down at Grayson, who glared up at him with the hatred of a man losing control. "You used me," Evan whispered. Grayson snarled. "You were nothing. A blank slate. A source of income. You should be grateful." Quote. The words made something inside me break. It wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It was just final. "That's enough," I said, stepping between them. "Your time's over." Grayson spat. "You don't even know if he's yours." As if on cue, the door behind me opened again. A courier entered the hall, calling out my name. "Delivery priority lab results." Dr. Shaw grabbed the envelope, tore it open, scanned the page. Then, she looked at me. At Evan. Her eyes softened. "It's a match," she said. "A full match. The world blurred with tears I wasn't ashamed of. Evan inhaled sharply, like he'd been underwater for 20 years, and finally reached the surface. I have a father, he whispered. You always did, I said. My voice cracked. You just didn't know. The officers pulled Grayson to his feet. As they led him down the hall, he spat curses, threats, the last gasps of a man whose power died in those motel lights. Evan and I walked outside together. The cold air hit us, sharp and honest. A new dawn was starting another pale morning. But this time, it didn't feel empty. We drove back to Maple Ridge Cemetery a week later. I wanted him to see where I'd spent 20 years talking to a headstone that didn't belong to him. The grave was quiet. The grass trimmed neatly. The stone still bearing Evan's name, a name we both knew, didn't belong there anymore. A crew carefully lifted the coffin. Inside were the remains of another young man, a missing runaway named Aaron Briggs. Forgotten by everyone except the truth. I arranged for a proper burial for Aaron. A real name. A real place. A real farewell. Evan stood beside me, hands trembling slightly. I'm sorry, he whispered. You have nothing to be sorry for, I said. You were stolen. But you're here now. We stood there a long time, father and son, reunited not by memory, but by truth, carved not from the past, but from what we chose to build next. Justice came late, but it came, and it taught me something I will never forget. Time can be stolen, identity can be taken, but truth survives, and when it rises, no lie can stand against it. Tell me, would you forgive them? Or would you choose justice? Subscribe for the next true Canadian family story on Fractured Vengeance. And tell me, from which city are you listening tonight?